Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Steven Brown, and in today's video, guys, I wasn't sure if I was going to do a video on where Zach Hyman ended up, but here we are. If you're an Oilers fan watching this video, stick through the little bit of Leafs stuff because I am going to talk about your team a little bit later in the video. In depth, do some salary cap projections, and even go over what type of player Zach Hyman was for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's looking more and more like it's either going to be a 7-year deal for $5.5 million with the Oilers or an 8-year deal for a shade under what Nugent Hopkins came in at. And we should also note that the Leafs reportedly offered Zach Hyman an 8-year contract, but it was more than likely closer to $4 million than it was $5 million. And if you're Zach, that's $8 million on the contract in total. The guy's got one shot to sign a legit contract, and I really don't blame him for going after the money. I mean, the rest of the Leafs certainly did chase the money, but anyway, June 19th, 2015 was when Zach Hyman was traded from the Florida Panthers, or his contract rights were anyway, for Greg McKegg. And I mentioned the date there because the Leafs didn't have a general manager at the time. They hadn't signed Lou Lamoriello yet, so it was assistant general manager Kyle Dubas and Mark Hunter running the show at the time, and they made the trade. They brought him in. Dubas was the general manager of the Toronto Marlies. Sheldon Keefe was the head coach there. They oversaw his development, and it all came full circle. And we really did go from why the hell is this guy playing with Austin Matthews in 2016-17 to why isn't this guy playing with Austin Matthews in 2021? He's 29 years old. His birthday was in June. A 7-year deal takes him until he's 36. An 8-year deal takes him until he's 37 years old. He's already had one major knee injury and another that kept him out for about 3 or 4 weeks or so this past season. He plays a really hard style of game that is really hard on the body. 8 years is a long time for Zach Hyman. But if you're the Oilers looking at this deal, you really only care about the next 4 or 5 seasons. Can Zach Hyman give you value in the next 4 to 5 years? Yeah, probably. In the next 3 years, he's probably going to be awesome on that contract still. But at the same time, hopefully in 4 to 5 years from now, you're betting on the salary cap going up and the contract becomes less troublesome. For the Leafs, it's the same sort of deal, but they got Austin Matthews and John Tavares and the rest of the cast signed for the next 3 to 4 seasons. They got guys like Morgan Riley to worry about. There are younger players like Rasmus Sandin who are probably going to get paid between now and then. It's a lot more sticky of a situation, and again, I am reserving judgment for the Toronto Maple Leafs this offseason until after free agency, because if they lose Zach Hyman and they don't get anything to replace him, going to start losing it. Let's be honest, Oilers fans, you don't really care that Zach Hyman didn't really bring a whole lot to the Maple Leafs' power play. You might care that he ate up a bunch of minutes on the penalty kill for them, but what you're really caring about, because let's be honest, guys, you guys really sucked at 5-on-5 without Connor McDavid on the ice. Zach Hyman's going to help a lot there. I don't really have any insight as to what the Oilers' lines could look like with Zach Hyman next season. This is just the lines from dailyfaceoff.com with him added in there, and obviously it's missing a guy like Kailer Yamamoto, who would slot in here on the second line and bump both Josh Archibald and Zach Kassian down a bit. And it was talked about at the beginning of the offseason, maybe a guy like James Neal could have been bought out, maybe a guy like Mikko Koskinen could have been bought out, maybe a guy like Zach Kassian could have been moved. Also, the Mike Smith contract is not finalized, the Zach Hyman contract is not finalized. These are just best case scenarios on what's been reported. Mike Smith, 2 years, around $2 million, giving you the benefit of the doubt there. Zach Hyman, 8 years at about $5 million, or 7 years at $5.5 million. If they can get something sorted out with the Leafs, then they're going to get that little bit of a discount. But even if you want to bump those two back up to a higher end projection, so 5.5 for Zach Hyman, 2.5 for Mike Smith over 2 seasons, it's still $8.2 million after placing a guy like Klefbom on LTIR. That is $8.2 million to go out there and re-sign a guy like Kailer Yamamoto, who I don't think is going to break the bank. And then that leaves you with like $5 or $6 million afterwards to go out there and bolster the decor a little bit. It would have been nice to retain a guy like Adam Larson, but you guys do have a lot of younger defensemen coming up in the system that need playing time. I know that was a point of contention in the playoffs, especially for guys like Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, who is no longer there, and even guys like Evan Bouchard had a really hard time getting in during the regular season. But I think you guys would agree that you would want at least one more name in there. With $5 or $6 million to spend after signing Yamamoto, yeah, the Oilers can bring in another viable top four option and slot everyone down a little bit. If you got two names in mind, maybe it makes sense to try to move on from Mikko Koskinen. But with no signing bonuses on the last year of this deal and with him having a 15-team no-trade list, it might be a little bit difficult. But also, Mikko Koskinen was a guy who produced for the Oilers at one point. In the season before that, was actually really good. He didn't get it done in the playoffs, but maybe if he didn't start so many games to start last season, he has better results with a little bit more rest mixed into it. Maybe he's closer to the goalie that he was in the first season that he was with the Oilers at the bare minimum, but I think you have to hope for a guy like Stalock to give you those numbers for a lot cheaper. One thing they can do to free up a little bit of cap space if they can't find a taker for Koskinen, and maybe they still want to hang on to some goaltending depth, is just place him on waivers. I don't think anyone is taking that contract, especially with the real money attached to it, and that frees up about another $1.1 or so million. As for what the Oilers could maybe give up to the Toronto Maple Leafs to get that 8-year deal to bring that number down a little bit, to have a little bit more money to spend on the cap each season, Kevin McGran's last piece about the Oilers and Hyman was kind of suggesting that maybe the Leafs could take on Oscar Klefbom's contract, but no. I don't think people understand how LTIR works. It is not bonus cap space. You are not creating space by putting a player on LTIR that you just acquired. Because if the player's not on LTIR, well, then they're just taking up that much space. And if you're paying someone else to replace the money that they're already costing you, you're not gaining anything. It's still net zero. And it also makes it near impossible to make trades in season. The year that the Leafs had Nathan Horton on their books and acquired Jake Muzzin, Nathan Horton was never on LTIR at any point in that season. He was just sitting on their cap, taking up $5 million in space. And they needed to do that. They couldn't place him on LTIR and spend to the cap because they needed to be able to afford if Matthews or Marner hit any of the bonuses in their entry-level deals. If the Oilers were giving anything to the Leafs for that 8th year, it would be more if they added in Oscar Klefbom's deal. In this little blurb here where it cites the Leafs did something similar in recent years with David Clarkson and Nathan Horton, yes, they only acquired Nathan Horton because he wasn't going to play anymore and David Clarkson still wanted to play. There's the difference there. You could use the cap space to replace the guy who still wants to play and that's not very good with someone else who is good. And they only reacquired Clarkson afterwards to push them over the salary cap in case Mitch Marner didn't re-sign before the beginning of a couple of seasons ago. Because by acquiring David Clarkson's contract to start the season, it allowed the Leafs to place both of them on LTIR immediately, rather than having to wait until Marner re-signed to be able to place Horton on LTIR. It was a preventative measure to protect themselves in case Marner didn't sign before the season started. The Leafs taking on Klefbom's contract only makes sense if he's going to be coming back for the playoffs. But at that point, the Oilers would want to keep him. And it doesn't sound like he is coming back. So it just makes no sense for either team. So I guess that's it, eh? Zach, I'm going to miss you, buddy. There's nothing else to it. But at this time, I really just want to wait and see what Kyle Dubas's plans are. I'm waiting. I'm waiting patiently for now. For those of you who are frustrated, I understand. For those of you that are angry and you were always angry, I wasn't listening then and I'm not listening now. And at this point, the video is not even about Zach Hyman. I'm just talking to the frustrated, angry Leaf fans here. And the reason why I have not gone full heel on Kyle Dubas here is the fact that he's really done an amazing job at rebuilding the Maple Leafs' decor without really giving up any major pieces to do it, too. It goes from Riley Hainsey, Gardner Zaitsev, Dermot Polak when he first took over, to Riley Brody, Muzzin Hull, Sandin Bogosian, throwing Dermott and Liljegren in the mix as well. Zach Bogosian more than likely doesn't come back, but that's a hell of an improvement. And he didn't have to give up any major pieces to really do it. And he did that while still signing those overpriced contracts and with the cap being flat right now. If the cap doesn't stay flat, it's like $7 or $8 million higher right now, and Zach Hyman isn't an Oiler, and the Leafs still have $9 or $10 million to work with. And that's not me excusing Kyle Dubas from the mess that the Leafs are in right now. That is me saying, I understand, but Kyle, it's time to start being proactive with things. And I am waiting patiently for those proactive things to come. So please, please.